So there already was a big crowd following Jesus. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He's probably come near the Dead Sea, and he's on his way to Jericho, and there is a large crowd who has heard about him and followed him already, and he's on the outskirts when he runs into this blind beggar and heals him. And I bet you that crowd grew in that moment, particularly grew from people who identified at the gates of the city with the blind beggar. And often the gates of the city and the outskirts of the city were full of people who were not accepted, who were voiceless, who were dealing with things that people thought in those times was a curse, or God had cursed them, or some sort of sickness. And so when they witnessed this, they joined in that crowd, I'm sure. Who is this one that has a voice and healing for someone like me? And they started to follow Jesus as he went into the city. And they thought to themselves, what outcast is he going to help next in Jericho? What voiceless person is he going to stand up for? What oppressed person is he going to liberate now? As the crowd grew and their expectations grew, were they in for a surprise? For as they approached that large sycamore tree, they noticed that Zacchaeus was in that tree, one of the most hated men in Jericho. A Jew who was in bed with the Romans, who was collecting taxes for that occupying power. One of their own people taking their money and giving it to an occupier. And on top of that, there were rumors galore that he was keeping a lot of it for himself, more than he needed. So can you imagine how disgusted the people were when the one person that got called out was this cheater, this person who had betrayed so many of them? How is it that Jesus could call out Zacchaeus, of all people, say, come down, know him by name, and then say that he wants to go to his house? All these people who were praising him just a few miles outside of town, all of a sudden, they all were grumbling in disbelief that Jesus could do something like this. How could the guy that stood up for the abused just an hour before all of a sudden go to the house of an abuser? It would be like Jesus calling out to the person who has disgusted you most in your life. The person you have had the most difficult relationship with. Jesus saying, you, come down, I want to go to your house. Last spring, we had a speaker at one of our men's breakfasts, a pastor colleague of mine. And he made a statement that seared into the core of my being when he said it. And I thought of it when I heard this story. The church's role is not to soothe our preferences. Its role is to challenge our assumptions. The church's role is not to soothe our preferences, it is to challenge our assumptions. And can't you see Jesus changing those words as he's gone from healing a blind beggar to inviting himself over to a hated tax collector? Hey folks, hey crowd, I am not here to soothe your preferences. I am here to challenge your assumptions. I'm not here just to rope in the people you want me to rope in. I'm here to seek and save the lost. And potentially that includes some people you strongly dislike and may even hate. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Jesus has got a great method. A great method. Do you hear it in the story? He noticed, he named, and he needed. He noticed, named, and needed. He noticed Zacchaeus up in that tree. We don't have a conversation in here. I go, what's your name? What's your name? He calls him out by name, Zacchaeus. And Jesus needed him. He needed to stay at his house. It is a great formula. And I'm here to tell you, this is one of these stories that we know and remember. Some of you probably remember this. This may be the first Bible story you remember. It sticks in there. And I think it sticks in there whether you think you are the most wonderful God's gift to this earth person or you have a hard time getting up in the morning because you feel like you are despicable. Most of us are somewhere in between there. And at the core of our being, we want to be noticed, we want to be named, and we want to be needed. And I think that's why we remember this story. Because Christ came for the full array of people. Whether it made it hard on him or not. And so we see ourselves in this story and go, I've got hope that God can do something with this mess. That I am noticed, that I do have a name, and that I may have some gifts and abilities that can be transformed and honed into what God calls us to. I'm so glad that God doesn't soothe our preferences. As we are on the doorstep of 60 years of ministry here at Hudson, as we get ready to celebrate next weekend, I hope God continues to challenge our assumptions. And in the midst of those challenging moments, that we will discover the three ends. That we will discover that we are noticed, named, and needed to participate in the light that is in the world despite ourselves. Happy almost birthday, Hudson Memorial. May God continue to challenge our assumptions. Amen.